Hey, good morning. How are you? First of all, a couple things to get started. First of all, I was glad to see Ben thank the production crew. My first real job out of university was I did sound and lighting. I was a sound and lighting technician, and it truly is a thankless job. The only time anybody ever says anything to you is something goes wrong. So I was glad to see you thank them. First of all. Second thing, if you've been to the other keynotes during this week that Ben just kind of listed for you. I'm going to just kind of let you in, perhaps on a little bit of disappointment. I don't have any photos or videos of me having anything implanted in me in my presentation. There's none of that in my talk. And as far as I know, there's nothing been implanted in me. But, I'm still young. There's still time. So we'll see how it goes. Look, here's what I want to talk about this morning. And to Ben's point, it's absolutely like I want to... Again, when I saw this theme, I was like, I work with teams, with making products and services. How do we bring this down to action? So I'm going to talk about software. I'm going to talk about the modern nature of software. I'm going to talk about the tremendous opportunity that we have with modern software development to enrich people's lives, to build products and services that make people more successful. And then a lot of the risks that come with that as well when we stop paying attention to the unintended consequences of the modern nature of software. We'll talk about that as we move forward. So we'll start with this. This is where I started my career. I was a software designer. In fact, I'm a designer, not a developer, which I also was like, what am I doing here? Right? Imposter. I was a software designer, and I worked on the software that went on these CDs. Right? And everything that we did was designed to make the software that went on these CDs as perfect as possible. And the reason why was because we worked in these 6-month cycles to make the thing called the Gold Master. Now, if you're old enough to remember the term the Gold Master, it's the disk from which all the other copies are made. And everything was designed, all of our processes and all the ways that we worked was designed to make sure that anything that we produced, anything that we coded, we designed, that went on the Gold Master was as perfect as we could make it based on what we knew at the time, because we were printing 15 million copies of those CDs at a time, and then shipping them to people's homes, primarily in the US, but also in Europe and the UK, and in France, and so forth. And that was the nature of software back in the 90s, right? That was the nature of it. It came in a box, right? That was it. And at those times, learning loops were long. It took us at AOL about 6 months to produce one of these Gold Masters, to print the copies, and to mail them out. And then we would wait for people to get the software, to install the software, hopefully to install it, right? To use the software, we'd get some feedback, we'd work for another 6 months, and then ship the next version. So our learning loop was about 12 months long, and that was roughly how long it took you to figure out whether the thing that you were making met some kind of a user need, right? Met some kind of a customer need and helped your company be more successful, right? The adoption of software, when we had boxed software, static software, was slow. It took time to get the code out to people. It took time for people to purchase. Remember, you had to go to the store and buy a box of software, right? That was cool, right? And then it took time for people to install it and to actually use it. The impact of the software that we were building was limited. Right? It felt like global impact, but it wasn't. It was limited to tech-savvy people who, primarily rich people, right? People who could afford a computer or worked in a tech kind of job, and the impact of the work that we were doing focused strictly on the people who used who were in computers, right? Who had computer jobs, whatever that meant, right? The goal of the work that we did was works as designed, right? That was it. Like, we knew we were doing a good job when we decided that the software should do something, and then we designed and coded it to do that thing. We saw that it did that thing, and then we shipped it, and that was the goal of the work. And the measure of success for us in the days of static software was shipping the software. We did it. Right? It's a binary thing, it's shipped, it's done, and we moved on. And that was the nature of technology about 20 years ago, right? And what's interesting, what's happened in the last 20 world, and by the way, in the opening keynote a couple days ago, there was a kind of a Star Wars, Star Trek divide. I'm firmly in the minority on the Star Trek side of things, just FYI. But software's consumed the world since then, right? Software's eaten the world. Mark Andreessen said that in 2011. And it's true, software is in everything that we do. It doesn't come in a box anymore. It's contained literally in every device, in every product, and every service we consume. It's in our phones. It's in our fancy coffee machines, right? The coffee machines have software in them now. And people are trying to attach software, as we saw in all the other keynotes here, to literally everything, not just their bodies, but to salt shakers as well. There's an opportunity to do that. The Smalt, anyone? Right? The world's first connected salt shaker, right? Software has consumed literally everything. And what's amazing, perhaps the most amazing thing that's happened in the last 10 years, is that the nature of software development has fundamentally changed. The way that we make software is wholly different, right? There's this ability to continuously deliver software to market, right? There's no longer this concept of going and buying software in a box. Right? You know this, right? Software just kind of shows up, we make the software, we continue to make the software, and the nature of that raw material, the raw material that powers our products, our services, and ultimately our businesses is now continuous. There's no end to it. Right? We're building systems. We're not building products, we're building systems. It's a shift in our thinking from building the static thing that we put in a box and give to people to building these systems. Right? Now, what's interesting is that there's been a difficult transition, a mindset transition from static software to continuous software. Right? We've got most companies, certainly the companies that I work with, think like this. They think about things in the concept of the model year. The model year, by the way, is the greatest marketing gimmick of the last 100 years. Right? Invented by Alfred Sloan at General Motors 100 years ago, the goal of the model year was to get you to buy a new car every year, because the only way that your car could do new things, could get new features or an upgrade, was to buy the next year's model of that car. And if you remember, we actually applied that model to software, right? There was Windows 95. The only way it got new features was Windows 98. The only way that got new features was Windows 2000, and so on and so forth. We applied that model year, that static mindset, even to technology for a long time. And then some modern software developers started to build cars, right, to turn that industry on its head. And then all of a sudden, your car can do new things. Right? Your car is a system, and it's part of a system that continuously learns and that continuously optimizes the experience that your users get out of that. Not just by sitting in your driveway and getting upgrades overnight, but the entire system that supports the car can be upgraded based on customer behavior, on customer needs, on what we're learning through the use of that system. In this story, Tesla goes from a tweet to a shipped feature in 6 days, which is pretty amazing, right? This guy Loic tweets at Elon Musk, and he says, look, every time I go to charge my Tesla in Northern California there, San Mateo, just south of San Francisco, he says, idiots. He's pissed, right? Idiots have left their Tesla on the charger. It's full. They've walked away for hours, and I can't charge my car. Within hours, the CEO of the company, Elon Musk in this particular case, responds. He says, you know what? It's a problem. I'm on it. 6 days later, they ship a patch to the entire supercharger network in the United States that says every minute past full that you spend on the charger, you now get charged money for that. Right? That's the nature of continuous software. That's the nature of modern systems thinking, right? The fact that we're always learning, not just from the devices, but from the people who are using our products at the same time. And this is an amazing capability. And with this amazing capability comes tremendous opportunity. We really do have this amazing opportunity to leverage modern software development tactics, the way that we build products, to build a continuous conversation with the people that we build products and services for. Right? Whereas when I worked at AOL, the conversation that we had with the users of our products in the 90s was it took 12 months to get through any kind of that feedback loop. Today, right, for you to be able to get through any kind of a feedback loop, it just depends on how quickly you want to work, right? How quickly can you get something into market, something small that tells you, that gives you, that makes an effort to impact the way that our customers or our users use our products. you've got the capabilities to sense, to learn extremely quickly what impact that thing that you put into market has on customer behavior. Through analytics, reporting, qualitative research, right? All of those things. And then lastly, you've got a tremendous opportunity to respond to what you're learning, right? And this idea is to, that we can reduce this learning loop in time is tremendously powerful, because the faster that we learn how our products and services are impacting customer behavior, the faster we can make them better. We can optimize, we can change them, hopefully to make our customers more successful, right? Because the faster you get through this loop, the less we invest in it, the less risk there is, the easier it is to change course. So what does that mean? It means that the nature of software development, how we think about software development, how we think about the success of software development has to change. First of all and foremost, we have to move away from this software factory mentality. Most of the ways that certainly the larger companies that I work with think about software developers is they are there to make the features and make them quickly and make more features and get them out there. But the reality is that more code doesn't equal more value. Right? It just equals more code. It doesn't necessarily mean that it actually makes the user experience or the customer experience any better. And because of continuous software, the measure of success of, hey, we shipped the software so that was good, has to change, right? We have to find new measures of success, new ways to think about this. And the measure of success that we actually want to drive forward is this thing called outcomes. Outcomes are measurable changes in user behavior. Those are your measures of success, right? We're building these systems. How are people behaving in the system? And then how does the code that we produce change those behaviors? If it makes them more successful, we're doing great work. If it makes them less successful, we roll that code back, we rewrite it, we figure out how to optimize the experience differently. And it's these changes in behavior that tell us when we've actually built something of value. Right? And again, it doesn't matter how much code it takes to get there, right? Ideally, it's the least amount of code that it takes us to deliver the highest amount of value. It's the least amount of code we have to maintain and move forward. But outcomes, these changes in behavior, tell us when we've delivered value, and they tell us when we are done, right? Again, done is not we shipped the product. Done is we have made customers successful to a certain extent. Let me show you an example. Okay, this is a case study that I love, and I realized when I was making my slides, actually this morning as I was going through them, that Chapter 11 probably doesn't mean anything here in Scandinavia. Chapter 11 is a US term for bankruptcy. It's when you file Chapter 11, it means your company has gone out of business, and that's why that's funny, in case you're curious. Sorry, you have to explain a joke, you know it's not funny. Anyway, Gibson Guitars. Gibson Guitars is out of business. Did you guys know that? It's really sad. They're out of business, and despite an attempt to reinvigorate the brand, guitar sales were dropping. Gibson brings in a brand new CEO. That CEO decides to innovate for innovation's sake. Let's make the features. Let's make the products. Let's not worry about what customers want. Let's just maintain the image that we've always had, right? This is the image they've always had, the guitar god image, right? And let's just make the features and hope that it will work. And nobody bought it, and Gibson's out of business. Conversely, Fender Guitars is thriving. Fender is thriving because they recognize that guitar sales may have been dropping, but there was a new market emerging. And that market was women. Half of new guitar buyers were women. This is what Fender's website looks like. Fender paid attention to the changing consumer consumption patterns of guitar buyers. They built products that suited this new market for them. And they built products and services, technology, that taught these new consumers how to play guitar, which is what they cared about. They didn't particularly care about Slash, right? What they cared about was buying a guitar that fit their body and learning how to play it. And the products and services that Fender has built, the features that they've built, have saved their business, and in fact, they are thriving. Those are the outcomes that they are looking for. And that's a fantastic example of optimizing for output, making stuff, versus optimizing for customer behavior, okay? Now, here's the problem. The problem with all of this is that we cannot predict behavior. Humans are very difficult to predict. Despite us having a good sense of what we want to make for them and what we think they want to do, we can't predict behavior. Let me show you an example, okay? This is an intersection in Massachusetts, in the United States. Now imagine that your job is to make this intersection safer. Specifically, what you want to do is you want to stop people from turning left at this intersection because that's proven to be dangerous, and you actually want to get them to stop before they turn. What would you do? How would you make this intersection safer? Well, some of you might say, well, I put up a stop sign and a no left turn sign. And that's what somebody did in this intersection. And the reality is, despite us being really good at our jobs and really smart and thinking that we know what our customers and our users want, despite that, there's a good chance that we're wrong when we put things out there. Now, to put a fine point on it, the stop sign is the feature. It's the output. The no left turn sign is the feature. It's the output. The outcome, the change in behavior, is what the humans are doing in all of this. And that's the measure of success of the stuff that we build. Now, you know this better than I do. Software systems are complex and unpredictable. It's difficult to predict how to build these systems, how they'll work, right, where the complexity lies. Interestingly enough, humans are also complex and unpredictable and unbearably stubborn at times. They will do the things that they want to do no matter what obstacles you put in their way. Right? They will work towards the goals that they are trying to achieve. Now, what's fascinating about human behavior is that it evolves over time, particularly when it comes to using technology. There are expectations that are set and particularly in the B2C world, in the business to consumer world, about how technology should work. And people expect products and services to behave this way over time. And we see that behavior emerge through the use of the systems that we build. We see people do things in the systems that we never predicted. And then it's our jobs as the makers of those products and services to decide what to do with that learning. Right? We built a thing expecting people to do one thing. They're doing something else. What do we do about that? Do we try to shove them back into the thing that we wanted them to do? Do we adopt that behavior? Do we do something else? Right? Those are the choices that we face. And in those situations, we can actually use that ability to learn, right? That continuous software, that continuous conversation that we're building with technology, with our users. We can use that learning to make our customers even more successful based on what we're observing in the system. Let me show you an example of that. This is an app called Citymapper. You guys know Citymapper? Comes out of London. It's a fantastic navigation app for getting around cities by foot or by public transportation or by bicycle, right? It's not a driving app. It's for everything except driving, basically, how to get around the city. Now, what would be the outcome that Citymapper would like to achieve, right? Well, ideally, the outcome is that people arrive at their destinations faster and more consistently, right? That's the change in behavior that tells us that we've delivered something of value. And that's what Citymapper optimizes for. And they've been building their product for a few years, and in doing so, they are observing the behavior of their users in their system. And in doing that, they learned something. They learned that there's a gap in the Transport for London system. That people were trying to get from a specific destination to a different destination in the city, and none of that was being served by any means of public transportation. And again and again and again, people were looking for ways to get from this particular point to that particular point, and no one was getting there. Now, they're a digital company, they're a software company, and they're thinking, well, how can we make this experience better? What can we build based on this learning? By observing this emergent behavior in our system, what can we do? And in their particular case, they actually built their own bus line, which is pretty amazing, right? They augmented their service to improve the outcomes of the users of their system. They designed their own bus, and in fact, they designed the interior of the bus as well to create this fantastic experience that mirrors the user experience of their app, which is pretty good, right? And not only for consumers, they actually redesigned the bus driver software as well, so the bus drivers can get the best route through the city as well to make that a more successful product and service both to the bus drivers and the users. And this is an amazing demonstration of learning from that continuous conversation, observing emergent behavior, and doing something about it to make your customers more successful. But here's the world we actually live in is this, right? Is that these outcomes that we optimize for inevitably end up creating these unintended consequences. Because again, humans are unpredictable, behavior is unpredictable. Let's look at Twitter for a second. In 2007, a Twitter user proposed that they use the hashtag. right? Twitter saw the hashtag being proposed and then used in the system, and then in 2009, Twitter adopts the hashtag as a feature in the system, and today they've monetized that feature. You can actually advertise against hashtags, and many of the things that we know and love came from the emergent use of the Twitter system as a whole. @replies, retweets, all of these things came out of the use of the system. But there are other things that came out of the use of the system, particularly for Twitter. And this was a really interesting thing in that Twitter was built to create this dynamic conversation around the world. But all of a sudden, Twitter created these unexpected consequences that started to get it into some trouble, particularly in the US, with some governments. And you can see the CEO, in this particular case it's Jack Dorsey, right, start to kind of make this public realization that the system that he built to generate a specific outcome had unintended consequences, right? He said, look, we built this thing to create instant public global messaging and conversation, but we didn't fully predict or understand, right, the naivety there, the real world negative consequences of the system that we built. The mobs, right, the doxing, right, all of the online harassment that takes place on there, right? And so now, right, he says we focused most of our efforts on removing the offending content instead of building the system that would keep this bad behavior from happening, right? We've encouraged this behavior, and now we're trying to take the bad behavior out instead of changing the framework, but we're going to work fast. We're going to learn, and we're going to make things better. That's the ultimate plan. And Twitter, as it always does, gave him the right kind of response to that statement, right? Which is exactly the system that he built and what he's talking about. Now, here's the thing. We talked about outcomes and optimizing our systems for improving the behavior of customers to make not only them successful, but our companies successful. But the reality is this, is that blindly optimizing for these metrics, right, the metrics that we think make us successful as a company, without considering those pesky real-world implications, is at best risky, as we're seeing with Twitter and others as well, and at worst, it can actually be criminal. I'm going to show you a bunch of examples of situations where people wrote code in the name of outcomes, in the name of changing customer behavior, and then generated some really interesting and in many cases troubling real-world consequences, right? So we'll start with this one. In the name of engagement, we hear that one a lot. Twitter, Facebook, right? All the social media sites talk about engagement, and perhaps the 7 million kilogram gorilla in the room is Facebook, right? Now Facebook, the outcomes that they're looking for, they've gifted us with these two metrics that some of your companies probably use, the concept of MAU and DAU. Do you guys know those words? Monthly active users and daily active users, right? Those are Facebook metrics, and that's how they measure their success. They want people using the system every day. They want people engaging with the system multiple times a day. They want people engaging with others. That's how they make money. That's how they succeed. Those are the outcomes, the changes in behavior that they're looking to produce. Well, guess what? The people in Myanmar were fully engaged in Twitter. 18 million people in Myanmar use Facebook as the internet, in many ways kind of harking back to the 90s where people used AOL as the internet. Right? And in this particular case, they were using it to out the Rohingya ethnic minority so that they could be rounded up and killed. Right? They're talking about the platform, the Facebook platform, in the name of engagement, created an enabling environment for the proliferation of human rights abuse, right? In the name of engagement. The UN says this may amount to genocide, and Facebook played a key role in this, right? Because this is the internet in Myanmar, right? And they were psyched to see people using the product on a daily basis, not realizing what people were actually doing with the product, right? The real world negative consequences. In the name of sales, if you're in retail, if you're selling anything, right? You're writing code that optimizes the sale of your product. You're optimizing the ability to sell more things to your target audience. Well, in this particular case, Target, the US retail store, does a lot of analytics, big data, and data crunching to understand, or to take a guess, to when women are pregnant. Because pregnant women buy a lot of stuff at Target. And when they think that a woman is pregnant, they start to send her advertising. to buy pregnancy things. Well, in this particular case, they sent pregnancy ads to a teenage girl in high school. And her father saw it. And her father called the store and he was furious. Because it's not just the ads online, but they were actually getting physical mailers in the mail. And he was furious. He called the store. He said, what do you send my daughter's in high school? How dare you send her this stuff? And then he went home and he had a conversation with his daughter. Turns out she was pregnant. She hadn't told him yet, right? Target told him, right? Because someone wrote the code to capture all of that data and then to create the kind of outcomes, in the name of sales, the kind of product and service that would then try to get this particular person to buy that, right? Someone had to write that code to do that in the name of sales. In the name of efficiency, the code that we write can actually discriminate, right? Amazon wrote an AI algorithm to sift through CVs because they get a lot of CVs and they don't have as many people to sift through them. They want to understand kind of where they should focus their efforts, right? Except that AI was biased against women. It taught itself to downgrade CVs that used words like women's, apostrophe S, the possessive, things like women's chess club captain. And there were specific universities that were all women universities that it would penalize and knock those CVs down in the ranks, right? Someone wrote that algorithm. Someone's biases are inherent in that algorithm. And it continued to do that until someone picked up on the fact that women were being downgraded in that particular process, right? In the name of efficiency, the outcome was to make the hiring managers more efficient, more successful, to find better fit, right? In the name of that, we were actually creating this pesky real-world consequence of penalizing women for applying for a job. In the name of personalization, right, something that a lot of companies do, can we create these personalized experiences for our users? The products and services that you code, that you create, end up spying on our kids. This is the smart Barbie, right? It's like an Echo, Amazon Echo or a Google Home for your kids. Your kids talk to it, it talks back. Guess what it does? It records everything your kid says. Why? Right, to personalize the experience, ultimately to sell you more stuff. But somewhere, your kids' voices are being recorded and stored. Right? Someone's writing that code. Someone, maybe not in this room, but someone is writing the code that creates that experience, that collects that data, that stores that data, that analyzes that data, and then can use that data for whatever they want. Right? In the name of changing customer behavior here, for getting them, again, personalized experiences to buy more stuff. Again, thinking through all of these edge cases in the name of convenience, right? We want to make life more convenient for people. They don't have to worry about certain things. It can be used to hurt people, right? Smart homes, lighting, locks, thermostats, you name it, are being used as tools of domestic abuse. Couples who have split up are now being abused by their exes when they turn the heat all the way up. They turn the air conditioning all the way down. They lock the doors. They make the house dark, right? They literally are abusing these people, right? Because no one thought about those behaviors in the system, those pesky, negative, real-world consequences, right? We're focusing strictly on the happy path and not thinking about the behaviors that our systems can actually generate. And again, somebody wrote the code. And in the name of news, perhaps the most egregious, right, is it can elevate the worst in us, right? And we've seen that again and again and again. And it's probably not a whole lot to say here other than this is the reality that we live with in the United States right now. And it's, again, because of news, because of click-throughs, because of engagement, because of the time on site metrics, right? Those are the outcomes that the news organizations are looking for, and this is the real-world consequence of that, right? Look, I like to pick on social media, I like to pick on retail because it's easy, but there's lots and lots of industries that are using software to change the behavior of their users. And again, in the name of making those users more successful. One of my favorite stories, and a story I've been telling for a long time, is the story of John Deere. I've been telling this for the last year or so. Now, John Deere is the Harley-Davidson of farm equipment. They really are. People love their John Deere products. Farmers have been using them for 100 years. I'll show you how much John Deere customers love their products. Check it out. This is how much John Deere customers love their products. Don't scroll any further. Like, look at the size of those tattoos back there. Really, people love this particular. They're completely married to these. They see themselves as Deere farms, Deere, like they literally call themselves that, and for good reason. The products and services that John Deere makes are amazing. Integrated hardware and software suites that allow you to automate the farming process, to use sensors, GPS, machine learning, big data, AI, to optimize to optimize the farming process and to create the highest level of efficiency, the lowest level of cost, and the highest yield for the farmers. This is a John Deere tractor that drives itself. It means a farmer can run 2 tractors, basically 2 machines at the same time by one person. Right? It's amazing, amazing technology. Honestly, it's one of the most amazing things, and you'll pay for it. You'll pay $500,000 to $1 million for one of these tractors that can do all of these amazing things. Really, that's what it costs, and that's great. Except there's one big catch for that, and the catch is that when you buy that tractor, you sign a license agreement for the software. What that actually means is that you're buying the hardware, but you're renting the software. You're renting the system. You don't have access to it anymore. You just paid $1 million for your fancy tractor, right? And you own the physical components of it, but you don't own the digital components of it, right? Because that's somebody wrote that into the code, right? That's the way that the policy of the business has been enforced in the code. And what that means is that when there's a problem with your tractor, when it breaks and you need to fix it, and if you don't fix it in time, you lose your harvest, you can't fix it yourself because you're not allowed to access the software. And you can't swap any product, any part in that system without accessing the software. You've got to get a John Deere dealer to come to your house, to come to your farm, right, with their computer, plug their laptop into your tractor, authorize the part swap the part, and go home. Because that's the business model that they've built into all of this, right? And so what is the outcome here? What is the change in behavior that John Deere is seeing? Well, they're seeing this. American farmers are downloading black market cracked John Deere software so they can hack their tractors. They're buying devices online that allow them to break the encryption on their tractors simply so they can change a spring or a tire or an axle based on whatever broke, right? That is what's happening. They're downloading these hacked products from the black market so they can simply do their jobs. That's the change in behavior that John Deere is seeing in their particular system. And the takeaway from this, and really all the other examples I want you to take home is this. When you write code, you're enforcing policy. You are. The business policies, the political policies, whatever it is of the organization that you work on, the code that you write enforces that policy. And when you enforce bad policy through your code, people will work around that policy because they're stubborn. They're going to figure out a way to do the thing that they want to do, or they're going to abandon your company and go work somewhere else. And when you find yourself in that situation as a maker of a digital product, or a digital service, or some kind of an integrated offering, the question you have to ask yourself is, are you solving user needs, or are you exploiting them? Because guess what? Both will make you money, right? And so again, as you find yourselves in these situations, ask yourself, look, you can argue and say it's a leadership issue, and it is, right? This is Ellen Powell in Wired, and she talks about how this is the incentive structure that Silicon Valley has set not only for startups and digital companies, but for the world, right? We're incentivized to drive towards these engagement metrics, right? Regardless of what happens, regardless of the consequences. This is what the expectations that we've set for the leaders in these organizations. But the reality is that you are the ones who are actually executing on these plans. And when I hear statements like this, and I hear this a lot from software developers, I work with cross-functional software development teams, and I hear this all the time. Look, whatever my product manager tells me to build, I'm just going to do it, right? Because I trust my product manager. They're smart, they know their job. So if they say to do it, I'm going to do it, right? I hear this a lot. I just want to write code, right? I hear this all the time, rightfully so. Okay, it's what you signed up to do. It's why you took this gig. Right? The reality is that it's just not that simple anymore. There are far too many unintended real-world negative consequences to the work that we do to simply say, I trust my product manager, right? Or I just want to write code. In fact, my friend Kenneth, who just published this amazing book on ethics, he said, look, by default, new technologies bear the ethical fingerprints of their creators, that's you, You're the creators of these new technologies, right? Not of wider society, right? And so you have to keep questioning whether the things that you're building, the policies that you're enforcing, are the right ones to actually enforce. Because again, the question to keep asking yourself, right, is what will your code be used to do? What are the strategic implications? Okay, if you forget for a second, right, the negative consequences on humans, what are some of the strategic implications to your company and the uses of the code that you write? Because guess what? You think the CEOs are going to jail? Nope. It's you, right? This is the guy who wrote the code that cheats the emissions tests for Volkswagen. The diesel emissions test. He's in jail. Got 4 years for writing that code. What did he think was going to happen with that code? Right? Are we going to generate some positive user outcome here? Right? Some positive change in behavior? We've got to keep asking ourselves. And really, if there's a few takeaways, I love this. I saw Kim speak a week ago, actually, just a week ago in Boston. Kim's a designer, and she's brilliant. And she says, look, metrics are good. Let's be goal-driven. Let's be outcome-driven. But let's be values-guided, and let's measure both. Now, what this means, I want to be very, very specific about what this means, okay? Goals are the outcomes we're targeting, the changes in behavior, the thing that I talked about at the beginning. Values are what we're not willing to sacrifice to meet the goal. That's it, right? So let's be goals-driven and values-guided. Let's articulate those very clearly, and let's measure both. And if we're starting to sacrifice our values to hit the goals, right, we've got to raise our hand, right? It's got to be an opportunity for us to raise our hand. So the question then becomes, what can you do, right? There's a lot you can do, actually. So a couple things as to kind of wrap this up. First, understand your business model, right? Heads down, I just want to code is fantastic. Understand how that code will be used to make money or make your organization successful. Be curious about that. Ask questions. Raise your hand. Ask your product manager. Ask your boss. Ask your CEO. How does our company make money, right? What's our business model, okay? Take an interest in your customers. Understand what their goals are. Understand what they're trying to achieve. Understand what success looks like for them. Remember, Works as Designed was our measure of success in the 90s. That doesn't make sense anymore, right? Today, it's about customer success. What are they trying to do with our products and services, right? Use the software that you're building, that continuous software, to learn. Always pay attention to the analytics, but not just the analytics, the qualitative feedback that you're getting as well. The what and the why, to understand how well the code that you're writing is meeting user expectations, and then how well it's meeting your business model, and see where the trade-offs are for that. Measure the impact of your work, right? Goal-driven, values-focused, right? Understand how the work that you're doing is impacting your outcomes and your values. This is key as you're starting to kind of think through what we're going to make and how we're going to make it. Discuss the dangerous edge cases. It's all too easy to focus on the happy path. And you're right, the overwhelming majority of your customers will use the happy path. But those that don't will destroy your product or service, your reputation, your brand, your company, or whatever it is. Discuss the dangerous edge cases as you work. How can somebody use this to attack someone? Right? Negatively. Where are the safety protocols that we have to put in place? And then lastly, and this is the most powerful thing that you can do, refuse to do the work that harms people. Okay? Refuse to do it. Stand up, walk out, walk away from your desks. Right? There's no reason to do this anymore. And there are companies and there are employees who are doing this around the world. These are 22,000 Google employees that walked out of their job to protest the way the company was handling sexual harassment, right? Not the creation of a product necessarily, but it's a point that you can organize with your managers, with your colleagues, to walk out at the same time and refuse the work that you know is going to have those negative real-world consequences. Look, I'm going to wrap up. I love movies. I'll wrap up with this. Jurassic Park always says things the best. Jurassic Park said this, look, your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could do something, which I know is what we love to do. All those biohacking keynotes were amazing and inspirational and mind-blowing, right? But they didn't stop to think if they should, and that's the key, and that's the thing I hope you take away from this. Thank you very much for listening.